I never thought I'd be the one typing one of these posts, but here we are. I'm a 67-year-old mother of one son, widowed for over a decade now. I've always prided myself on being independent. I worked for 35 years as a librarian, saved carefully, paid off my mortgage early, and lived a pretty quiet, peaceful life. I garden, I bake, and I take long walks. That's it, nothing dramatic. Until now. My son David, 34, has always been, well, intense. Smart, ambitious, always wanting more. I love him. He's my only child. But over the last 5 years, I started noticing things. He married a woman named Elise who came from a wealthier background. At first she was sweet, if a bit distant. But once they had their second child, something shifted. The visits became less about seeing me and more about what I could do for them. It started small. Mom, could you watch the kids this weekend? Or do you mind paying for the grocery run this time? I didn't mind. I actually enjoyed helping. But then it escalated. Every Sunday night, like clockwork, David and Elise would come over for dinner. At first, it was nice, a tradition. But somewhere along the line, it turned into a ritual of expectation. No thank yous. No offers to help. Just dirty plates and complaints about how tight things are financially. Meanwhile, I'd hear about their weekend wine tastings or Elise's new yoga retreats. I brushed it off. That's what mothers do, right? But last month, during one of these dinners, David leaned across the table with a look I couldn't quite place, part pity, part strategy. And he said, "Mom, starting next month, we'll transfer all your money to my account. It'll just be easier. You don't really need to manage it all alone at your age." I didn't react. I just smiled. I don't know what he expected. Tears? Gratitude? Relief? All I felt was a cold, gnawing ache in my gut. I smiled because I needed to buy time. Because in that moment, I realized something. My own son saw me not as a person, but as an asset, a vault. I cleaned up dinner that night in silence. Elise didn't even look up from her phone. But I didn't say anything. Not yet. Instead, I got to work. Over the next 2 days, I met with my lawyer, a no-nonsense woman named Carol who didn't sugarcoat things. We set up protections on my accounts, placed a freeze on any joint access attempts, and changed the will. Next, I changed the locks. And then I waited. That following Sunday, they showed up as usual. Elise was already scrolling through Instagram as she walked through the door, while David was mid-rant about rising mortgage rates. They stepped inside and froze. Everything was gone. The dining table they loved so much? Gone. Replaced by a small card table and one chair. The family photos? Removed. The smell of rosemary chicken? Nowhere to be found. Instead, silence. And a single note on the table that said, "Dinner's canceled. So is the plan." They both screamed. Actually screamed. Elise dropped her phone. David turned redder than I've ever seen. "What the hell is this?" he barked. I just stood at the end of the hallway, watching. I hadn't spoken to them since. That was a week ago. And it's only the beginning of what I've discovered. To be continued. I've been replaying everything in my head since that night. You know how people say hindsight is 20/20? I think that's a lie. In reality, hindsight is cruel. It sharpens every little moment you ignored. Every red flag you told yourself was just a phase. Because the truth is, this didn't start with the transfer your money comment. That was just the moment I finally let myself see it. David wasn't always like this. He was a sweet, curious boy growing up. Always wanted to help, always had big dreams. But even as a child, there was a stubborn streak in him. If he wanted something, he had to have it. As a single mom for most of his life, I did everything I could to give him the world. Maybe too much. I first met Elise at his graduation from business school. She was gorgeous, polished, and frankly intimidating. I could tell immediately that David adored her, but also that he was trying to prove something to her, like he wasn't quite good enough yet. She came from a family of country clubs and vacation homes. We were more coupons and casseroles. They got married within a year. I paid for most of the wedding. Didn't blink. It felt like love. I was just happy he was happy. But soon after, the calls started changing. Instead of, "Hi, Mom," it became, "Hey, can you babysit Friday?" Instead of "Let's catch up," it was, "Can you help cover the car payment this month?" Elise had to quit her job during the pregnancy. Again, I said yes. That's what parents do, right? But what really eats at me now is this. Somewhere along the way, they stopped seeing me as a mother and started seeing me as a wallet. There was this moment, I think it was the first time I really felt something was off. It was Elise's birthday. They threw a party at this absurdly expensive sushi place downtown. I wasn't going to go. I don't eat raw fish and hate driving at night. But David insisted. When I arrived, Elise barely acknowledged me. I handed her a modest gift, a handmade scarf I'd spent weeks knitting. She opened it in front of everyone. Her face didn't move. Then she said, "Oh, thanks," and set it aside like a napkin. That stung. But what really hit me was what happened after. I excused myself to the restroom and overheard Elise in the hallway. She was talking to one of her friends. She still thinks gifts matter. Bless her. David says she's sitting on at least $300K in savings. We'll get there. That was 2 years ago. I pretended I didn't hear. I told myself she meant, "We'll get there," as in, we'll be financially independent one day. But deep down, a seed of dread planted itself in me. Over the next few months, things piled up. Subtle jabs. David asking for account access, in case something happens. Elise casually mentioning how much space my house had. And wouldn't it be great if they could move in someday? They even brought their financial advisor to dinner once, without warning, and he started asking me questions about my estate. That night, I couldn't sleep. I got up at 3 a.m. and sat at the kitchen table with my old notebooks. I still balance my checkbook by hand, something David makes fun of. I started writing down every single thing I'd paid for in the last 2 years. It wasn't a list. It was a damn novel. Trips, furniture, baby supplies, medical bills, a Peloton for Elise. And it was all just expected. That was the moment something in me snapped, quietly, without drama. I stopped answering every call, started saying no, stopped smiling when Elise made her barbed comments about old people and their hoarding. And that's when the real mask started to slip. But nothing, and I mean nothing, could have prepared me for what I'd find on David's iPad the day he forgot it at my house. To be continued. So here's the thing about betrayal. It never comes like a lightning strike. It creeps in like fog. At first, it's just mist on the glass, a flicker of discomfort you can still explain away. But then, suddenly, you can't see anything at all, and you realize you're already inside the storm. David and Elise came over 2 Sundays before the scream, the usual drill. They brought nothing. I cooked. Elise sat on her phone the whole time, scrolling Instagram reels with the volume all the way up. David was moody, checking emails between bites of food he never complimented. That night felt different, though. There was this weird tension between them, short glances. Elise snapped at him when he asked for more mashed potatoes. Literally said, "You have 2 working hands, don't you?" in front of me. After dinner, David helped me take out the trash, which in our world qualifies as a major act of kindness. He rushed out afterward, saying he left a few work things back home. Elise didn't even say goodbye. It wasn't until the next morning that I noticed the iPad. He must have left it on the side table in the living room. I don't normally touch his things, but I figured he'd want it back ASAP, so I charged it to make sure it was on and texted him to let him know it was here. He didn't reply. Not that day, not the next either. Now, I'm not proud of this part, but I think some of you will understand. Curiosity is a funny thing, especially when your gut is already screaming. The iPad didn't have a passcode. I wish it had. The first thing I saw was a set of text messages between him and a contact saved as M. Sparkles, not Elise. The first message was just 2 nights old. M. Sparkles. Can't wait to see you again. I hate pretending in front of her. David. I know. She's exhausting. She thinks I'm still invested in our future. Tears of joy and sparkles. You're not bringing her on the ski trip, right? David, of course not. I told Elise it's a team-building thing, face with rolling eyes. At first I thought he was talking about Elise, but then I saw it. The photo. It was from 2 weeks ago. My backyard. My porch. David and Em, a younger woman with long, dark hair, kissing. Her legs were wrapped around him, her face buried in his neck. I could see my garden hose in the background. I felt like I couldn't breathe, like someone had unplugged the oxygen in the room. I sat there frozen, gripping the edges of the iPad like it could save me from drowning. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped it. This wasn't just about money anymore. It wasn't just greed. My son, my baby, was cheating. Not only on his wife, but doing it in my home, while eating my food, while letting me babysit their kids so he could sneak off with her. For hours, I sat in my chair in the kitchen, staring at the empty sink, at the little dish towel Elise once called so dated, at the fridge covered in my grandkids' drawings. I wanted to scream. I wanted to call Elise. I wanted to drive to his house and throw the iPad at his smug, lying face. But I didn't, because something else hit me just as hard. What if Elise already knew? And what if she didn't care, as long as the money kept flowing? What if I had never been the family matriarch I thought I was, but just the ATM keeping the whole charade running? I didn't sleep that night. I just kept scrolling. Photos, messages, deleted drafts of emails he never sent, a shared Google Doc titled, "After the Divorce, Custody/Finances Plan." It was all there. And I was just another line item. To be continued. I spent the next few days in a daze. You know that moment in the movie where the character walks through their own house like it's a stranger's place? That was me. Every room felt different. Every picture on the wall, every crayon drawing, every smiling Christmas photo looked like a lie now. Like I had been the only one believing in something that never really existed. I didn't call him. I didn't call Elise. I didn't cry either. Not yet. I think I was beyond crying. I felt hollow, like someone had reached inside my chest and just scooped everything out. But I did make a plan. I waited until Sunday. I wanted them to come here. Like always, I needed to see their faces, to hear their excuses, to find out which one of them was faking what, and how far it all went. That morning, I packed up everything in the dining room. The heirloom plates, the silver David always said I should sell, the photos, the art, even the dining table that had been in this family since before David was born. I put it all in the garage and locked it. I replaced it with a flimsy folding table from the basement. One chair, no centerpiece, no food. I changed the locks too. Bless Carol, my lawyer, for thinking of that. Then I sat by the window and waited. They showed up at 5:37, 10 minutes later than usual. David was on his phone. Elise didn't even knock, just walked right in like she always did. And then I heard it. That moment, the gasp, followed by, "What the hell?" I stepped up from the hallway. They were both standing in the empty room like someone had robbed the place. David spun around. "Mom, what is this? Where is the table? What happened here?" Elise looked me up and down like I was dirt under her shoe. "Is this some kind of joke?" I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I just looked at them and said, "Dinner's canceled. So is the plan." David blinked. "What plan?" "You know, the one where I become your personal bank account while you screw your mistress in my backyard." The silence was electric. Elise turned so fast to look at David that her earring fell out. "Wait, what?" David froze. Like an animal caught in headlights, he didn't even try to lie. Elise's face changed. For a split second, I thought she might actually hit him. "What the hell is she talking about?" she hissed. Who is she?" Still, David said nothing. Just opened and closed his mouth like a fish. "Don't bother," I said. "I've seen the messages, the photos, the plans." That's when it really sank in for Elise. "You disgusting bastard," she shouted, stepping away from him. "You told me you were ending things with her. You said—" She stopped herself. I looked at her. "Oh, so you knew?" I said. "And you were still coming here every Sunday for roast chicken and a free babysitter?" Elise looked like she wanted to vanish. "It wasn't like that." "Then what was it like?" No one answered. David finally found his voice. "Mom, you're overreacting." Wrong words. So wrong. I took a slow breath. "You tried to transfer my assets behind my back. You had an affair in my garden. You lied to your wife. You lied to me. And you have the audacity to call me dramatic?" He took a step forward like he was going to explain something. Some excuse. Some ridiculous gaslight. But I cut him off. "You are no longer welcome in this house. Not you. Not her. You can collect your things next week. Don't bring the kids. I won't be here." Elise looked stunned. "You're kicking us out?" I smiled. The first real smile in days. "I'm reclaiming my life." To be continued. After they left, the house was so quiet it felt haunted. Not by ghosts, by memories, by echoes, by things I thought were real. I didn't clean up, didn't move the folding chair, just sat there, alone, in the middle of a hollow room, staring at the mark on the floor where the dining table used to be. I couldn't believe how heavy silence could be. At 9:12 p.m., my phone buzzed. "David." I let it ring. He called again at 9:14, then 9:16. I turned the phone face down. At 9:19, he texted, "Mom, please, can we just talk? You're being cruel. Elise is losing it. What about the kids?" And that one stopped me. What about the kids? My grandchildren. Lily and Max, 6 and 3. Two bright-eyed, giggling whirlwinds who love my lemon cookies and think dandelions are magical. They weren't part of this mess. They didn't ask for any of it. But how do you separate the child from the parents? How do you draw a line between your love for them and the betrayal that came through the same bloodline? I didn't reply. Instead, I cried. Finally, I cried for the scarf Elise tossed aside, for every roast chicken, for the driveway chalk drawings, for the baby shoes I kept in a box under my bed, for the woman I thought I raised, for the son I did. I cried so hard my shoulders shook. Because here's the real wound. It's not just what they did. It's what it made me question. Was I a bad mother? Did I spoil him too much? Enable him? Did I fail to teach him what love looks like? What decency looks like? Or did I just raise someone who was never capable of empathy to begin with? It's a terrifying thing to admit, that the person you love most in the world may not deserve that love. I thought about calling my sister, but we haven't been close since the funeral. I thought about calling my neighbor Sharon, but she always had this look in her eyes when Elise came over, like she knew something I didn't, and I wasn't ready for an "I told you so." So I just sat in my silence, in my heartbreak, and somewhere in the early hours of morning, I made a decision. This house, this life, this version of me, it wasn't working anymore. I wasn't just going to kick them out of my Sunday evenings. I was going to reinvent what Sundays meant. I pulled out my yellow legal pad, the one I used to make grocery lists and budget plans and birthday menus, and I started writing something new. Plan for Phase 2. Call Carol, update will, block power of attorney requests, adjust emergency contacts, meet with banker, remove David from any beneficiary accounts. Password protect everything. Find a therapist. This one took effort. I circled it 3 times. Decide about grandkids. Custody visit options. Mediation. Boundaries. Look into solo travel. Maybe Italy, maybe the coast. Somewhere near the bottom I wrote, "Don't let betrayal turn you bitter. Let it set you free." I underlined that, twice. At 6:42 a.m., the sun broke through the kitchen window. I made myself coffee, just for me. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like someone's mother. I just felt like me. To be continued. 3 days after the confrontation, Elise showed up at my door. No text, no call, just a knock at 8:30 in the morning. I was still in my robe, sipping coffee and watching the morning light spill over the hydrangeas I planted 20 years ago. I didn't want to open the door. But I did. She stood there in leggings and a coat far too expensive for someone constantly complaining about bills. Her eyes were puffy. No makeup. Her hair thrown into a messy bun that wasn't like her usual polished self. She looked cracked. "Can I come in?" she asked. I paused, thought about saying no. But then I saw something in her arms. Max, asleep on her shoulder, his thumb tucked in his mouth, his tiny fingers clutching a stuffed bear I bought for him last Christmas. Behind her, Lily stood quietly, holding on to Elise's purse with both hands like it was a lifeline. "Just for a minute," I said. She walked in slowly, like the house had changed shape. And in a way, it had. I didn't offer coffee. I didn't ask her to sit. But I knelt down and opened my arms to Lily, who immediately ran into them. "Grandma," she whispered, curling against my chest. "Mommy said we weren't going to see you anymore." I looked up at Elise. She flinched. "I didn't mean for it to come out that way. I was angry. You were complicit." "I didn't know about the affair," she said quickly. "Not really. I had suspicions, but I ignored them." "Why?" She shifted Max higher on her hip, then let out a bitter little laugh. "Because I was afraid. Afraid that if I rocked the boat, I'd lose what little security I had left." "You mean financial security?" "No," she said. "I mean you." That stunned me. "I know what you think of me," she continued, "and I probably deserve some of it. I married into this family for all the wrong reasons. David made promises. Big ones. Lifestyle, support, love. He talked a good game. And when it started unraveling, you were the only one who made anything feel normal." I stayed silent. She placed Max gently on the couch, where he rolled over and kept sleeping. Lily crawled up beside him, curling under the blanket like it was instinct. "I don't want to lose you," Elise said, voice cracking. "And I don't want them to lose you." Her hands trembled. "I know I've been entitled, rude, distant, whatever label you want to give me, but you've been more of a mother to me than my own ever was. And I let David treat you like a resource." Now I had to sit down. She looked smaller than I'd ever seen her. "I'm not asking you to forgive him," she said. "Hell, I'm not sure I will. But I need to ask for something selfish. Let the kids still see you. Don't punish them for our failures." I looked over at Lily and Max. Their tiny hands, their soft breathing, the weight of their innocence. It broke me. "I would never punish them," I said. "But I won't let them be used as leverage either." She nodded. "That's fair." We sat in silence for a while. Not friends, not family. Just two women surrounded by the debris of the same man. Before she left, Elise said something I didn't expect. "I've already contacted a divorce lawyer." I blinked. "I'm done playing house with a man who uses people like furniture," she said. Then, more quietly, "I should have left when I first saw the way he talked to you." The door closed behind her a minute later. I didn't cry this time, but I did feel something shift. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like the victim of something. I felt like the witness to someone else's turning point. To be continued. I should have known he wouldn't let it go. David never could handle losing control. When he was a boy, he'd scream if a game didn't go his way. When he was a teen, he broke a window when I refused to buy him a new phone after he shattered his. I thought he'd outgrown that. He hadn't. 2 days after Elise brought the kids over, I got an email. Not a text, not a call. An email. Subject: clarification. "Mom, I've tried to be civil. I'm writing instead of calling, so we can have a clear, mature discussion about what's been going on. I'm concerned about your mental state and recent decisions. You've always been generous, but these recent actions, changing the locks, removing us from your life, are alarming. Elise is confused and deeply hurt. The kids miss you. I'm trying to keep things calm, but you're forcing my hand. If you continue this course, I may have no choice but to consult a lawyer regarding your fitness to manage your own affairs." I read that last line 5 times. Then I printed it out, walked to the kitchen, and taped it to the fridge, just so I'd never forget what kind of son I raised. I didn't reply. I sent it straight to Carol, my lawyer. She responded with one line: "Let him try." The next morning, he showed up at my door. Again. No call. Just appeared, all puffed up chest and clenched jaw. "Open the door!" he shouted. "I know you're home." I didn't. He started ringing the bell, over and over, like a child throwing a tantrum. "Are you seriously going to shut me out over a mistake? After everything I've done for this family?" That line made me laugh. I actually laughed. Behind the locked door? He'd done nothing for this family. I was the one who raised him alone. Who skipped meals so he could go on field trips? Who sold my engagement ring to help him pay for grad school? Who gave and gave and gave, and now he was here, threatening me with lawyers because I dared to say no? He eventually stopped. I watched him from the upstairs window as he sat in his car for a long time, probably crafting another manipulative message. Sure enough, that night, "You're breaking this family apart. I don't even recognize you anymore. Don't say I didn't try." I didn't respond to that either. But his words echoed anyway. "I don't even recognize you anymore." Funny, because for the first time in a long time, I'm starting to recognize myself. That night, I did something I hadn't done in years. I danced in my living room. No music, just me and the soft creak of the floorboards. I twirled in my socks like I was 20 again. Not because I was happy, God, no. But because I was free. Free from the lie. Free from the guilt. Free from the manipulation. The next day I met with Carol again. She recommended putting a formal no-contact notice in writing if David kept pushing. We also discussed what to do if he tried to weaponize the grandkids or take legal action. She looked me in the eye and said, "What he's doing is financial abuse. And emotional too. You're doing the right thing." I nodded. But I didn't feel brave. I felt tired. So tired. Still, I had to ask, "Do you think he's capable of really trying to take me down? Like, fight me for my own money?" Carol didn't hesitate. "Yes, but he'll lose." I walked out of that meeting with shaking hands but steady feet. Because I wasn't afraid of David anymore. But I was beginning to mourn him. Because the boy I raised, he's gone. And in his place stands a man I barely recognize. To be continued. After the showdown with David, I thought the silence would feel peaceful. It didn't. It felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, staring down into a space that used to be filled with Sunday dinners and phone calls and baby giggles. Now it was just quiet. I stopped checking my phone. I stopped answering the door. I didn't want sympathy. I didn't want questions. I didn't want anyone looking at me like I was broken. But grief has a funny way of showing up when your guard is down. On Thursday, I opened the cabinet to grab a plate and found one of Max's sippy cups in the back. I didn't cry. Not right away. I just stared at it for a full minute, like it had appeared out of nowhere. Then I held it to my chest and slid to the kitchen floor. I don't know how long I sat there. Just breathing. Just hurting. I'd never felt so abandoned in my life. And yet, I was the one who had to do the abandoning. That's when the knock came. Not a pounding, not a ring of the doorbell. Just a knock. Soft, hesitant. I wiped my face, got up slowly, and peeked through the curtain. And my heart jumped. It was Tom. Tom, my late husband's best friend. We hadn't spoken in years. Just the occasional Christmas card and the awkward funeral hug when Rick passed. He'd moved to Oregon shortly after. Said it was too painful to stay around all our old haunts. He looked older, thinner, but his eyes were the same. Gentle, thoughtful, a little sad. I opened the door. "Hey," he said. "I hope this isn't weird." "It's weird," I said. "But good weird." He smiled. "I heard what happened. Well, not all of it. Just that you've had a rough time lately." My first instinct was to shut it down. To say, "I'm fine," and fake a smile. But I couldn't do it. Not with him. Not now. I stepped aside. "Come in." We sat on the porch. I made tea. He brought cinnamon muffins in a paper bag. Said he remembered they were Rick's favorite. We talked for 2 hours. About nothing and everything. about Rick's awful jokes, about the town getting too noisy, about how he'd gotten divorced 5 years ago. Amicable, but sad. About how he'd always thought I was the strongest woman he'd ever known. I laughed. Then I cried. Then I laughed while crying, which I hadn't done in ages. Finally, he said something that stuck with me. You know, I always thought Rick was the good guy in our group, the one who'd do anything for his family. But I watched you over the years, the way you carried him, the way you built everything after he was gone. You're the reason David had a chance at anything. I don't know what's happening between you two now, but I know one thing. What? You don't owe anyone the pieces of yourself just because you're their mother. I just stared at him. You don't owe anyone access to you if all they do is take. He left that night with a hug and a call me if you ever want company that doesn't expect a casserole. I stood in the doorway for a long time after he drove off, because for the first time in weeks, someone had reminded me I still existed outside of David, outside of motherhood, outside of betrayal. There was still me in here, somewhere, to be continued. It was Elise who called me next, a full week after her visit with the kids, just as I started getting used to the quiet. I didn't expect to hear from her again, honestly. Part of me wondered if she'd backpedal, if she'd let David smooth it all over with sweet talk and gaslighting. But when I picked up, her voice was sharper, steadier. He doesn't know I'm calling, she said right away. Okay, I said. Are you safe? Yes, she answered. But he's unraveling. I sat down. She told me she'd hired a divorce lawyer, a real one this time, not a friend of a friend that David could charm. She'd moved back in with her parents temporarily. An act one knew must have bruised her pride more than anything. He didn't take it well, she said. First he yelled. Then he cried. Then he told me I was throwing away everything he built. Everything you built, you mean? I said. She gave a tired laugh. He hasn't paid the mortgage in 3 months. He was waiting for your transfer. My stomach turned. I knew he was circling my money. I just didn't know how deep. Elise hesitated. It gets worse. She had found more. Bank statements from a secret account he'd opened 6 months earlier. Thousands in withdrawals. Spa weekends. Hotel stays. A jewelry purchase that never made it home. And I thought I was the only one being used. No, she whispered. He's used all of us. But what really shook me was what she said next. He told me if I tried to take the kids, he'd make sure I regretted it. That sentence sat between us like a dropped glass, sharp and dangerous. I've started documenting everything, Elise added. Screenshots, voicemails, texts. My lawyer says it's crucial. I told her she could always list me as a witness. I'd seen the manipulation, the lies, the neglect. He's going to paint me as unstable, she said. That I'm emotional, vindictive, irrational. I said, he said the same thing about me in that email, that I was unfit. We were both quiet for a long moment. Then she said, I don't want your money, you know. I believe you. I just want peace. And I want them, her voice broke, I want them to grow up with someone who loves them more than they hate losing. That was it. That sentence cracked something open in me, because it put words to what I hadn't been able to say aloud. David doesn't hate me because I withheld money. He hates me because I stopped playing along, because I refused to be another woman who enabled him. And now Elise was refusing too. The next evening I got a knock at the door. It wasn't Tom this time. It was a courier with legal documents. David was suing me, attempting to claim I was financially unfit and emotionally unstable and should not be managing my own estate. He was trying to force guardianship. I read every word 3 times. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even shake. Instead, I placed the documents on the kitchen table, took a deep breath, and picked up my phone. I called Carol. Let's go scorched earth, I said. And we did, to be continued. It's funny how courtrooms are so quiet. Sterile, almost. I always imagined a legal battle would feel dramatic, like something out of a courtroom drama on TV, raised voices, slammed fists, tearful confessions. But no. The day I walked into that courthouse to defend my right to live my own life, it was fluorescent lights, coffee breath, and a judge with bags under her eyes, who had clearly heard it all before. David had filed a petition to be granted temporary financial guardianship over me. The wording in the paperwork was clinical and cruel. Pattern of erratic behavior, recent impulsive decisions, possible cognitive decline. He was painting me as a doddering old woman who was spiraling, who needed saving from herself. And he really thought it would work. Because that's what narcissists do. They count on charm, on confidence, on people underestimating the quiet ones. But David forgot something. I raised him. I know every trick he has. My lawyer, Carol, came in like steel wrapped in pearls. She'd compiled everything. The texts, the emails, the money trail. Elise had even submitted a statement of support, under oath, describing David's coercive behavior, the secret bank accounts, the emotional manipulation, and his admitted intention to isolate me for financial control. Carol turned to the judge and said calmly, "Your Honor, this is not a case of elder care. This is a case of financial abuse. My client is lucid, responsible, and in full control of her life. What she hasn't been in control of is the emotional blackmail from her own son." The judge raised her eyebrows at that. David sat across from me, looking flushed and shaken. He hadn't expected Elise to turn on him. He definitely hadn't expected me to bring receipts. He'd submitted a statement too. I had to sit there and listen as he described me as increasingly paranoid, withdrawn, and emotionally unstable. He said I'd locked him and his family out, and that I was withholding contact with his children as punishment. When it was my turn to speak, I didn't lash out. I just told the truth. I gave my son everything, I said. My love, my money, my time, and when I finally said no, once, he tried to erase me. I looked straight at him then. He wants my money, not my well-being, and I won't let him rewrite this story just because I stopped being useful to him. The judge didn't say much. She took it all in. Said she'd deliver a decision within the week, but I could see it in her face. She knew. She saw the truth of it. After the hearing, David tried to catch up with me in the hallway. I saw him coming down the marble corridor, faster than he probably realized. Mom, wait! Carol stepped in front of me. We're done here. No, we're not, he snapped. You're going to ruin me over some bruised feelings? I looked at him one last time. You ruined yourself, David. I just stopped pretending you didn't. He scoffed, but his eyes were wet. I don't think it was grief. I think it was rage, because I'd taken away his mask. That night, Elise texted me one sentence. He showed up at my parents' house, screaming. My dad had to call the cops. She sent a second text 5 minutes later. The mask is slipping fast. I stared at that message for a long time. Because it's true what they say. When people can no longer control you, they try to control how others see you. But I was done hiding. Let him scream. I was finally free. To be continued. The judge ruled in my favor. There was no dramatic gavel slam, no courtroom gasps, just a dry official letter in the mail 2 days later. The court finds no grounds to assign financial guardianship. Petition denied. I read it 3 times, then set it down on the kitchen counter. And for a moment, I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt grief. Because you don't go to war with your child and come out whole, even if you win. David didn't call after the ruling. No apology, no tantrum, nothing. Silence. Which was almost worse. I kept waiting for the next blow, the next manipulation, the next carefully engineered guilt trip. But it didn't come. Instead, it was Elise who reached out. It's done. I filed for full custody. He's not contesting it. I didn't ask for details. I sensed there were too many. But her next message floored me. He told my parents he might leave the state. Says, everyone here is against him. Part of me still wanted to scream at her, "You let this happen. You let him treat me like a tool for years." But a bigger part, the quieter, wiser part, recognized something else in her voice: survival. She wasn't just dealing with a bad husband. She was escaping a man who'd been unraveling for a long time. And she wasn't running, she was fighting now. For her kids. For herself. Maybe even for me, in a way. That Friday, she brought Lily and Max by after daycare. No David. Just them. They ran straight into my arms like nothing had happened. Like the weeks of silence and lawyers and doors slammed in anger had never existed. We baked cookies. Max got flour on his nose. Lily asked if she could keep her coloring page forever, because it was the best one ever made in history. For 2 hours, I remembered who I was before betrayal cracked me open. I was Grandma. Just Grandma. After they left, the house smelled like sugar and crayons and happiness. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I laughed. Not a bitter, dry laugh. Not a sarcastic one. A full, warm, head-thrown-back laugh at nothing in particular. Just the absurdity and joy and relief of still being alive, still being here after everything. That night, I poured a glass of wine. I opened the window. And I sat quietly in the dark, watching the breeze move through the garden. I thought about all the things I had lost. The illusion that love always means loyalty. The belief that blood is a guarantee. The fantasy that I could somehow protect everyone forever. But I also realized what I'd gained. Boundaries, clarity, self-respect, and maybe something else too. The next morning, my phone buzzed. Tom. Just a simple message. "I'm heading to the farmer's market this weekend. Thought of you. Want to come?" I stared at it for a moment. Then I smiled. Maybe grief and joy can exist side by side. Maybe it's okay to build something new, even if the past still lingers like a ghost. I wrote back, "I'd like that." To be continued. There's something oddly intimate about buying yourself new shoes in your 60s. I hadn't realized how long I'd been wearing the same pair of sad, fraying walking shoes until I caught my reflection in the window of a boutique downtown. There I was, the woman who had stared down lawyers and courtrooms, who had spent months unraveling the twisted braid of love, guilt, and manipulation, still clinging to the souls of a former life. I walked in, bought a pair of red leather flats that felt scandalous and young and entirely impractical. And I wore them to the farmer's market that Saturday. Tom was waiting near the entrance with 2 coffees and a paper bag that smelled like warm bread. He looked different in the daylight. Less like Rick's friend, more like just Tom. "I brought the cinnamon rolls," he said, holding up the bag like a peace offering. I grinned. "I brought my scandalous shoes." He looked down and whistled. "Well, damn, who are you?" And I laughed. It bubbled up out of me so fast I startled myself. Not because he was funny, but because he meant it. He was seeing me. Not as David's mom, not as the widow, just me. We walked slowly past the honey stand and the flowers, and the man playing blues on a worn guitar. I bought a bunch of sunflowers. Tom carried them without being asked. At one point, we sat near the edge of the market, by the fountain where kids were splashing their hands in the water. He didn't pry, didn't ask how I was holding up. Just passed me the coffee and said, "You seem lighter." "I feel heavier," I said. "Yeah," he nodded. "Sometimes those are the same thing." I looked at him, and he met my gaze without flinching. I didn't realize how long it had been since someone looked at me like that, with nothing to gain. Not long after, Elise called. "Lily's school is doing a grandparents' breakfast," she said. "She asked if you'd come. She drew you a picture." My throat tightened. "Of course I'll come," she paused. "David's name is off all the school forms now. Emergency contact is me and you. That okay?" It was more than okay. It was everything. That evening, I took out a journal I hadn't touched in years, the one Rick gave me for our 10th anniversary, embossed with my initials and still mostly blank. I opened to a fresh page and wrote, "I am allowed to change. I am allowed to grieve, and I am allowed to want more. I think I had believed, deep down, that after a certain age you just coast. You pour into others. You watch your world get smaller. But maybe that's not true. Maybe the real magic, the real rebellion, is realizing your story isn't over just because someone else wanted to write the ending. I'm not naive. David hasn't reached out again, but I know he will. There will be some apology, some spin, some performance. But I've built my spine now. I've rebuilt my walls. Not out of fear, but out of truth. And inside those walls, there's room for Elise, for the kids, for Tom, for me. For once, I don't feel like I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. Because I bought new ones. And they're red. To be continued. It was a Wednesday morning when I saw him. I was walking back from the post office, sunflowers poking out of my tote bag, red shoes clicking against the pavement. I'd stopped for a second to admire the window display at the antique shop when I caught the reflection in the glass behind me. David. He was standing across the street, hands in his coat pockets, just watching me. He looked tired. Not the kind of tired that comes from a long week. The kind that sinks into your bones when your life isn't working anymore and there's no one left to blame. I stood there, pretending to admire an old typewriter, giving myself a few seconds to decide. Fight or flight? I chose neither. I turned slowly and looked him right in the eye. He didn't move at first. Then he crossed the street and stopped a few feet from me. He looked smaller, not physically, emotionally, like someone who'd been inflated by ego for so long that now, without it, he wasn't sure what shape he had anymore. "Hi, Mom," he said. It was the first time I'd heard his voice in weeks. "Hi," I replied. "Can we talk?" I nodded toward the bench in front of the bakery. Neutral territory. Public. We sat in silence for a while. I didn't offer small talk. I didn't ask how he was. Finally, he said it. "I lost my job." I said nothing, he continued. "They said I'd become unreliable. Said I'd been difficult to work with. I guess I was. I've been angry and distracted. Still, I said nothing. I wanted to know where he would go with this, without my rescue. "I'm not seeing Em anymore," he added. "She ghosted me." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because of the pattern. David never ended anything. He just self-destructed until people removed themselves. He sighed. "I messed everything up." That, at least, was true. "I don't know how to fix it," he said. "I don't think you can," I replied quietly. He looked over at me, startled. Like part of him still believed there was a version of this where I opened my arms, handed him a check, and welcomed him back into the nest. "I'm not angry anymore," I said. "That's the worst part. I'm just done." He looked like he wanted to cry, but I didn't comfort him. That reflex, the mothering instinct, was gone now. Not out of cruelty, but out of survival. "I miss the kids," he said. "You should have thought about that before weaponizing them," I answered. He flinched. "I didn't know how to stop pushing," he said, almost in a whisper. "You were always so solid. I guess I wanted to shake you. Make you, I don't know, need me?" And there it was. The truth, buried in years of power plays and guilt trips. He had hated needing me, so he tried to flip it, tried to make me the needy one. "I don't need anyone," I said, "but I still love people. That's the difference between us." He nodded, eyes glassy. "Is there anything I can do?" I looked at him. "Finally, honestly, you can stop pretending you didn't do this. You can sit with it. And if you ever want a real relationship with your children again, start by becoming the man who deserves it." We sat for a moment longer. Then I stood up. He didn't follow me, didn't beg, didn't yell. He just sat there on that bench, watching me walk away. And for the first time since this began, I didn't feel guilt. I felt peace. To be continued. 2 weeks passed after the bench conversation. No texts, no emails, no surprise knocks at the door. It was like the tide had finally gone out, dragging with it the anger, the manipulation, the weight of years spent trying to hold together something that had been splintering from the inside. I didn't feel victorious, just clean. Then one morning, Elise called. "I know you said no surprises," she said, "but there's something Lily wants to give you. She made it at school." I could hear Lily's little voice in the background, shouting something about the rainbow dress. I laughed. "Is that what I think it is? You'll have to see." They arrived just after 4 p.m. Elise was calm, collected, a woman becoming herself again. There was a lightness in her I hadn't seen in years. Lily bounded through the door with Max trailing behind, clutching a crumpled piece of paper with both hands. "Don't look until I say," she shouted. I sat on the couch, pretending to shield my eyes, as she smoothed the paper out dramatically on the coffee table. "Okay, now." I looked down. It was a drawing. Crayon on construction paper, simple and bright. A big house with a garden, 2 stick figures. One tall with brown hair, me, one small with yellow curls, Lily. We were holding hands. But it wasn't just the picture that undid me. It was what she wrote, in shaky block letters at the top, "Me and my safe Guama house." I didn't realize I was crying until Lily touched my arm. "Don't be sad, Grandma. It's happy." "I'm not sad," I whispered. "Not even a little." Elise looked at me, eyes glistening. She says your house feels different than anywhere else. Calmer. Like a blanket. I reached out and pulled Lily into my lap, holding her tighter than I probably should have. "Thank you for this," I said. "It's the best thing I've ever been given." Max, not to be left out, toddled over with a Lego block and said proudly, "I built a monster truck." "Of course you did," I said. "You're a genius." That night, after they left, I pinned the drawing on the fridge, right where David's legal letter used to be. I stood there for a long time, looking at it. That fridge had once been a battlefield of reminders, fear, and control. Now it held a love letter, in crayons, from the one person in my family who saw me exactly as I wanted to be seen. Safe. That word hit me harder than I expected. Because for so long, I'd been useful, I'd been available, I'd been needed. But I hadn't felt safe. Not in my own home. Not in my own skin. Not until I started saying no. Not until I let it all collapse. Not until I stopped protecting the wrong people and started protecting myself. I made a cup of tea and watched the sunset out the back window. The garden looked tired, but not dead. The first shoots of spring were already pushing up through the frostbitten soil. I felt something loosen in my chest, something gentle. Forgiveness. Not for David. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But for myself. For staying too long. For believing love had to be earned with sacrifice. For forgetting that it's okay to begin again. Even in your 60s. Even after everything. The house was quiet. But this time, it didn't feel empty. It felt mine. To be continued. I didn't think I'd share all this. Honestly, when I sat down to write that first post, I was just hollow, grasping for something to tether me. I wasn't looking for advice. I just needed someone to know. Someone besides me. Someone to say, yes, this is real. Yes, this was betrayal. No, you're not imagining it. And maybe you've been there too. Maybe your betrayal didn't come from a son. Maybe it came from a partner, a parent, a friend, someone you trusted. Maybe you kept giving, even when it hurt. Maybe you told yourself it was just a phase, that they'd see your worth eventually, that love would fix it. But here's what I've learned. Love isn't a debt. It isn't something you prove by sacrificing pieces of yourself until you're a shadow of who you used to be. Love is safe. Love is steady. Love doesn't require you to erase yourself to deserve it. I spent years giving David the benefit of the doubt, excusing, defending, overcompensating. And maybe that's the heartbreak that cuts deepest. Not just what he did, but how long I let it happen. Because I wanted to believe I was building something strong. But I was patching holes in a boat he'd already decided to sink. And when I finally stood up, he called me unstable. He called me cruel. He threatened to take everything. But I'm still here. I still have my house, my garden, my Sunday mornings with the smell of lemon cookies and crayon drawings on the fridge. I have Elise. Not perfect, not forgiven, but present and trying. I have Max and Lily, who run through my front door yelling, "Grandma!" like I'm the sun itself. And maybe, just maybe, I have Tom, the man who shows up without expecting anything, who brings cinnamon rolls and calls me strong when I don't feel like it. I don't know what's next. I'm not pretending this is a movie where everything wraps up in a neat little bow. I still miss David, not the man who threatened me, but the boy I used to read bedtime stories to. The boy who once held my hand in the grocery store and asked if I'd be around forever. Maybe I will always grieve him, but I won't chase him, because I know now. Grief doesn't mean you owe someone your life. It just means you loved them, and that you still choose yourself anyway. So to anyone reading this, to the people pleasers, the givers, the ones who've been made to feel guilty for having limits, here's what I want you to know. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to walk away. You are allowed to stop bleeding for people who never plan to stop cutting. And it's never, never too late to begin again, even if you're 67, even if it's messy, even if you have no idea what life looks like on the other side. Because I promise you, there is life, and it's waiting for you, with red shoes and sunflowers. And one quiet, brave step forward, the end.